Good morning. Hi.
Right.
Change. Hey, Francis. Hey, Andrew.
Hi, how you doing? Is there an order that everybody's going in?
It said TC, TC need to go first because TC got 1 o'clock things, right?
Yeah, I'm actually over in Long Beach at the rally at the Board of Trustees office. I stepped aside for the spotlight or for the event here.
Yeah, I know. Are you in a bus or something?
I'm actually I'm in my car right now.
You're
So
in your car. So you didn't join them on the bus.
if there's some air, I figured me doing this sort of thing in the back of the bus was probably not ideal for anybody. So, but anyways.
Yeah, yes, I know. So, okay, so how was the meeting at the BOT?
Good. It was loud. There were some good speakers, and just finished up my Jimmy John's lunch. So
Are you one of the speakers?
I was not one of the speakers, no. So I've only got a face for radio. So
I see. Did anybody from our campus speak?
yeah, Chris, who's I believe is the leader for the campus Teamsters union was one of the speakers. So
Oh, I see. Mhm. Yeah, I had to ask you to find out what my husband's doing because
I
he's very tight-lipped about
I,
what he's doing.
I saw him running around. I didn't get a chance to talk. No.
Mhm. Hi, Jasmine.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So we'll see. I know Allison may have some. Allison, so do you have any internet problem or you're okay for now?
Okay. Oh, you're talking to me? Hi, good
Yeah.
morning. Hi. Okay. I just had to come to the Claremont Club. I just got kicked out of my last class that I was teaching. So I don't know what's going on, but I'm here for now.
Mhm.
Kind of a public space, but it's quiet.
Mhm. You're at the cafe area at the Claremont Club.
People are sort of looking at me, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, I used to do that. I still remember doing a certain time when I have internet problem. I had to go to Claremont Club
You know,
to use the internet. And I still remember I even
See,
had to
I
take my
think of-
daughter go there when we have the problem with Spectrum. So she had to
oh
take
yeah,
homework and all
yeah.
that.
I think in our area, yeah.
It's very
Except for
bad.
some reason, my Bluetooth AirPods are not syncing. So
Mhm,
anyway,
mhm.
uh,
Hi, Easy. Hi, Rob. Hello.
can you hear the music in the background?
No, no, you seem to be okay. I didn't hear any background. I didn't hear any noise.
I don't know what's going on. It's so weird that I can't hear my one more thing because I'm not plugged in.
Mhm.
So like the whole cafe can hear my computer
Hey,
right
then
now.
they get
So
to hear
uh,
the presentation. That's great.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I know I have to do something here in my settings.
Mhm. And
System.
Easy, welcome. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us. And Francis, thank you so much for joining us. So are we okay with the speaking order was TC go first because you may need to go. And then Jasmine second, Andrew third, and Miriam fourth. Okay. I see that we have people join us. Hi, Kathy. Thank you so much for joining us. Hi, Tafi. Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.
Jay, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm really clue why my AirPods aren't working.
Mhm.
It's working. Oh,
We will also have power stew as your backup in case there's
Yeah,
something happen.
yeah, but I'm okay here. It's just I'm not able to plug in, but we'll figure it out. Well,
Mhm,
I'll
mhm,
just be quiet
mhm.
in the
All
cafe.
right. And Alexandra, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. All right, how about maybe and Jenny signing up? Let's just wait for 1 more minute. I could hear the tower striking noontime. Mm. Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay. All right. So how about let's get started. Again, thank you so much for joining us as we celebrate our 4 faculty who got promoted. So we have Professor T.C. Corrigan and Professor Andrew Oak promoted to 4 professors, and Professor Jasmine Lee and Miriam Fernandez promoted to associate professor and also early tenure. So big congratulations to their achievement as they reach a big milestone of their professional career as well. And this is always a wonderful moment for me as we celebrate faculty's their promotion, their excellence in teaching, research, and service. And so each panelists will have time to talk about one thing they are most proud of. I'm sure they have extraordinary achievement, but we want to ask them to talk about something either in the teaching or research, creative, or service area they're most proud of. And so this, again, as we are sort of kind of celebrating their big milestone and their promotion, and also kind of help us to think about their contribution and then share their pride and joy with us. And so before we start, again, I want to thank all the audience for joining us and help us kind of celebrate and to hear and celebrate our faculty, their accomplishment, and also enjoy their talk, and as we put them on the spotlight. And so first, I want to thank all the presenters as well, and also Professor Alison Riget, and will be serving as a facilitator, and she's also on the college evaluation committee. So each year when we had the faculty spotlight to celebrate faculty who got tenure and promotion, I always ask one of the member of a college evaluation committee, because they are the one who read the file, so they know their file very well, but also to thank them, and also to to express my appreciation for faculty who serve on the college evaluation committee, because it's a lot of work, and we always have to beg people to please serve on the committee. So thank you so much, Professor Alison Riget, for serving on the college evaluation committee. It's a very important committee, and you're doing the heavy lifting for the committee, and also doing a very important work for the college and for the faculty. So I want to thank you for serving as the facilitator for today's presentation. And I also want to thank Emily McKellar for organizing and sending out the publicity for this event, so we have audience who could join us as well. And also I want to thank some of my fantastic Dean's Office staff, Diana De La Cruz, and also Rich Wayne, and also Professor Paris Dufay, our associate dean, for helping us out as well too. So then, without further ado, I hope you enjoy each presenter's presentation today. And now I'm just going to turn the floor to Professor Alison Riget, who will facilitate today's presentation and faculty spotlight.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for the introduction, Dean Chuang, and it's a pleasure to be here and introduce our 4 faculty members who are going to present today. I had the distinct pleasure of being on your college evaluation committee, and I got to know your work intimately. And congratulations to all of you. It's a pleasure to see you all succeed and read about your accomplishments. I believe the time frame is 10 minutes per presentation, and I will be keeping time. So I will give you a signal. Gosh, I will do a hand raise 1 minute before time so we can stay on track. I am sort of in an odd predicament presenting from a cafe because my Wi-Fi went down about half an hour ago, but I think it should go just fine. So bear with me. But first off, we have Dr. Thomas T.C. Corrigan, professor from the Department of Communication Studies. And T.C. Corrigan is a professor at CSUSB Department of Communication Studies. His teaching and research examines the relationship between wealth, power, and media, also known as the political economy of communication. Boy, we need this research desperately right now, don't we? Specifically, TC studies political economic research methods, digital labor and internships, the business of sports media, and the Inland Empire news ecosystem. Please welcome Dr. T.C. Corrigan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Allison, and thank you, Dean Schwang and the entire Dean's office for organizing this event, especially Emily McKellar. You always put on such terrific events for us here in Cal, and so thank you for your work in organizing today's conversation. I also am patching in from a not ideal set of circumstances. So I'm actually over in Long Beach at the Board of Trustees joint action by the CFA and Teamsters and Students for Quality Education. So apologies if my video or audio is not at its usual campus level of quality. So I'm also going to be leaving a little bit earlier because I need to get back to San Bernardino for a faculty meeting later. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with some information about some of the stuff that I'm most proud of that I've been working on here over the last few years in the Department of Communication Studies. Allison, you mentioned that I study the political economy of communication, and I'm really interested in method in political economy. So political economy examines the relationship between wealth, power, and the media. We ask questions like who owns the media, for what purpose, for instance, for power or for profit. What are the social and cultural implications of those arrangements? And how can we create a more just and democratic media system and society? My experience, though, in this sort of sub area, since I was a master's student and got introduced to the political economy of communication, was that we haven't really done a great job articulating our methods as a research subfield. And I really saw this when I was a PhD student, thinking about, how do I articulate in my dissertation what I'm doing here, and having a hard time sort of finding good resources to explain how we do what we do. And I knew we had good methods, but we didn't have sort of good resources for explaining our processes. So oops. Over the last few years, I've been publishing a handful of pieces that sort of work to try to bridge this methods gap. I had a piece in International Journal of Communication in 2018 that explained two key processes of political economy methods, how we burrow down in corporate and government documents, and how we use them to listen into elite discourses. It's hard we can't be flies on the wall in the corporate boardroom or in the hall or in lobbyists' offices. So we oftentimes have to use sort of documents that provide sort of traces of what's happened in those spaces to make sense of them for our research. In this piece, I was really looking at the trade press, so publications like Ad Age, Editor and Publisher, Broadcasting and Cable, as important quasi-independent documentary sources to make sense of wealth, power, and the media. And I'm interested in this piece in sort of evaluating the strengths and limitations of those publications as data sources. More recently, I've been working as a co-editor on a forthcoming volume. Much of this work sort of came out of my sabbatical research. It's a co-edited volume on method in the political economy of communication. And I'm working with a handful of really excellent political economists. Sorry, I've got a motorcycle that's revving up outside my car. My apologies. But in this piece, I'm thinking less about sort of empirical methods and more about what I describe as a method of theorizing. So how we go about conceptualizing social phenomena. And I think this is sort of the part of political economy method that, in my opinion, hasn't been explained particularly well. And so what I'm doing in this, in my chapter in this volume, is turning to a philosophical framework known as critical realism to make sense of our ontology and epistemology. And I argue in my chapter in the volume that that we use structural analysis to conceptualize unseen structures. So things like class, capital, and ideology, things that are just hard for us to, put your finger on, right, to see and directly observe. But nonetheless, we know we're there, right? How do we make sense of these unseen structures? And also, in addition to deduction and induction, which are sort of familiar reasoning approaches, I identified two approaches known as abduction and retroduction that are important for teasing out and making sense of the implications of those unseen structures. So that's the sort of the piece that it'll come out in this book will come out in January, and I'm really excited about it. And I'm hoping that it's a useful volume for folks who study the political economy of the media and want to put a finger on what our methods are, or what their methods are for doing the research that we're doing. My next piece that I'm going to be working on in the spring is an encyclopedia entry in Oxford Research Encyclopedia of Communication, focused on political economy methods. And what I'm going to be doing there is sort of reviewing those two pieces that I just talked about. But I also want to think about what are our methods of intervention, right? If we find things that are problematic in the media system, how do we go about trying to make change in those areas? And so I'm going to be in this piece expanding, this concept of method to include practices like culture jamming, which is a form of consciousness raising that a lot of political economists engage in, supporting radical and alternative media, media labor organizing, and media policy activism is sort of, a few key areas that are central to our method of intervention. So I'm really, this has been a multi-year sort of project that turned into, something of a research agenda, and it's work I'm really proud of, but I'm also just really hopeful that it helps people who do what I think is really important research in the area, be able to make sense of what they're up to articulate it, and to hopefully build better scholarship by having some sound methodological resources. So, yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for that. Any questions from our audience?
I can ask a question.
Sure.
Oh, go ahead, actually, if others have questions. Miriam, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, actually, I was just clapping.
Okay. So TC, this is very interesting, and I would love to read the Routledge book when it comes out. I was wondering if you could give us some examples of the questions that scholars ask in the area of political economy of communication.
Yeah, so probably one of the most prominent examples right now that I think illustrate some of the key tensions in the area is, what's happening at Twitter, or now X, right? You've got, at least, within the past year, I'm not sure if he is still, but, Elon Musk was the most, the richest man in the world and also owned one of, maybe not the most, lucrative or the most, the largest user base among social networks, but arguably the most influential in terms of shaping political discourse. If you're a politician or a journalist that isn't on Twitter or X, right, it's almost hard to imagine that. And one of the questions that comes up is when an algorithm, for instance, at Twitter is adjusted to prioritize certain content or deprioritize others, is that the sort of thing that is the function of new ownership at the company, right? Someone with stated ideological interests, stated economic interests. He's not just somebody who owns Twitter, but also owns Tesla, Starlink, right, SpaceX, and clearly has a vested interest in how those companies and related policies are covered. Are changes in the algorithm a function of his position as an owner, right, in a autocratic structure like a corporation, or is it a reflection of that company's need to generate profits, right, and to create a return on investment for shareholders? And so political economists are sort of interested in teasing out those influences, for instance, private ownership, but also sort of the need to generate profits in a capitalist economy. And how we do that, right, is one of the things that I'm trying to get at, right? What's the method for disentangling those influences? So.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Matthew, I see you have your hand up.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Alison. Yeah, and thanks, TC. I know that you and I share quite a lot in common in terms of our interests in political economy, mine in relation to the political economy of art. But what I wanted to ask you, which, we haven't really, you and I really haven't had an in-depth conversation about this, but I wonder in your field, what you feel are, or what you observe are the really kind of complicated, knotty aporia that currently exist. And the reason I say that, or the reason I ask that, is because we probably typically think of, or at the very least, liberal thinkers, but the socio-political economic context of a neoliberal capitalism or neoliberal governance underpinned by a kind of deregulated or increasingly deregulated capitalism means that there's increasing kind of redundancy or impotence for left-wing or socialist critiques of a more centrist, globalist, unregulated capitalist kind of ideology. And I wondered where the really kind of complicated, really difficult areas are that communication studies scholars like yourself who deal with political economy see. And the reason I say that is because, there's always been, but it's burgeoning at the moment, a really explicitly right-wing field of political economy, which in many ways is incredibly successful. And so I just wondered what the sort of where are the gaps? Where are the kind of really difficult, intractable problems?
Yeah, I think one thing that you're getting at there is that sometimes critiques of corporate power have been used to fuel sort of populist campaigns that that I might not agree with at all. So we see a lot of the critiques of concentration of ownership and corporate power in media and in society more broadly being sort of spun around and used to support right-wing fascist political campaigns, and that I find really, really troubling, because many of the folks who generated that research, especially in the 60s and 70s, they were coming from explicitly left politics and saying it's problematic to have media ownership concentrated in a few folks' hands. But all of a sudden we see folks, for instance, associated with Trumpism, using those same messages as part of a critique of the globalist elite, right, as they make it out to be. So I think there's some issues there. To me, I think the biggest question for political economists is we've had pretty solid critiques, I think, for some time, but not significant policy movement in terms of shifting media ownership, in terms of shifting tech policy. But now is a really important time, especially as people are coming to grips with how social media has impacted the democratic process, especially post January 6th, but also concerns about artificial intelligence and these sorts of things that could really disrupt the labor force, could disrupt education, and these sorts of things. And so to me, it's a question of how you translate, how we translate effective, how we affect change in terms of those policy structures. That really is an important question. It's great to have solid analyses and critiques of those sorts of systems, but if you don't translate that into important shift politically, that's a big second step.
Thank you, Dr. Corrigan, and thank you, Matthew, for your question. I'm so glad you're doing this work. It is such a messy situation at the moment. So we do need to move ahead here. So congratulations again, Dr. Corrigan, for your work and promotion. Dr. Jasmine Lee, Associate Professor, Department of English. Professor Lee is an associate professor in the Department, of English. Her primary research and teaching interests include pedagogy, media and culture, effective rhetoric, and most recently writing at the intersection of familial and public histories. When she's not working for CSUSB, Jasmine is on assignment for her favorite boss, her toddler. I can relate to that. Thank you so much. Dr. Lee, whenever you're ready to take over.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen here. Thank you all for being here. It's really exciting to see all my colleagues come together in the middle of what is the complete chaos that is week 11 and this semester specifically. So thank you all for being here. When I was given this opportunity to think about what it is that I wanted to share that I'm most proud of, this was kind of challenging for me to think about what I wanted to talk about, and sort of I've been moving away from from the research projects that I started in my with my dissertation, and sort of trying to find a new direction for what's kind of fueling my my career building at this time. And so I thought that I would just spend this time to talk a little bit about my revised approach to thinking about what it means to have an academic career. And so I want to talk a little bit about kind of this theoretical and philosophical shift that I've been pursuing from moving from building a career outside of, from the PhD program on, to thinking about academic work as a space to foster conditions of possibility. And so I'll talk a little bit about what that means and what that means to me and how I've landed here. So I really appreciate this opportunity to think about what it means to be where I am now. So as Dean Chong mentioned, I was very fortunate to receive early tenure, and also last year I was recognized for outstanding service, And so, kind of thinking about what it is that I have done here and what it is that I want to continue doing. It was nice to have this chance to kind of reflect. I'm also really grateful to my colleagues and students for supporting and being part of this kind of ongoing learning process for me as I build my professional life. So in my kind of previous life, I did a lot of work on political economy, which seems to be the kind of theme for for today. A lot of the work that I did in my dissertation was thinking about neoliberalism and the way that neoliberalism shapes subjectivity building. So thinking about rhetorical agency, how we understand ourselves as rhetorical agents, how we understand ourselves as people, how this influences the way that we teach reading and writing when we are living under the conditions of late capitalism. So as we are moving away from kind of a sense of public good, as we are privatizing and becoming these like little entrepreneurial individuals, how does that shape our relationships? How does that shape our understanding of ourselves, our sense of family and community, networking, communication, and then how do we think about ourselves as people who can produce change? So as I was doing this work, I kept finding over and over these conclusions of like, well, like, we aren't thinking our way into capitalism. We are just sort of being formed in capitalism, right? We are, the way that we talk about our goals and our our relationships, these are not rationally shaped. We don't say like, oh, I want to get as much as I can out of every situation and really leverage all of my social relationships to increase my use and exchange value. We weren't rationally thinking these things. These things were happening at a level that was outside of our cognition. And so as I kept landing on these conclusions, I was becoming really sort of bummed, for a lack of a better word, just about, I mean, how do we think ourselves out of this if we aren't thinking ourselves into it? And so I left my PhD program with a little bit of what I started calling critique fatigue. Like I just couldn't keep producing these same critiques. I wanted to find some threads of hope. And there are examples of critical hope that exist within Marxist cultural theory, but they aren't always as hopeful as they think they want to be. And so as I was kind of moving into my next projects, I landed in affect theory. And I became really interested in the ways that we are moved by the environments that we are in, by how the conditions and the friction of everyday life generate their own kind of persuasive energies, and what this means for me as a person in rhetoric and as a person who teaches rhetoric. How do I think about working with this non-rational model of persuasion as a teacher, as a critical pedagogue, as a person who's interested in future building? And so I've been sort of exploring that space. This has involved a little bit of a rejection of mastery, letting go of this sense of control that I have to shape my destiny and to shape the world around me, letting go of the possibility of definites and really trying to lean into thinking about collaboration in a meaningful way, thinking about hope in a critical way. And so that's what's happening in my research. And this has really informed what I do in my teaching and my service. I've moved away from teaching as this kind of teaching a set of set skills and objectives to teaching as listening, and also teaching listening. I've revised a lot of the research assignments in my classes, and especially in my graduate classes, to invite students to really sit with material and tap into conversations and really listen deeply before positing an argument or trying to find a direction through their work. I've adopted a person-first pedagogy, especially in my class policies, where I really emphasize students' expertise. I really respect students' ability to decide for themselves, what they're capable of, what they're interested in, what they want to bring to the classroom, what they want to leave the classroom with. I've really worked to structure my classroom as a space for showing up. And I've been looking for opportunities for play. So thinking about how we can use imaginative and convention bucking thought work and composition work to help us think outside of some of these structures that are so insidious. So this is also involved at the same time that I've been doing way too much assessment work, thinking about how to write open-ended SLOs, not just measurable SLOs. And so this is kind of what that's looked like in my teaching. I wanted to talk a little bit about how this has informed my service, because I think that I approached, when I joined the CSUSB, I thought about service as like the work that keeps the wheels moving, right? It was like that service work was this kind of just maintenance, upkeep, keeping the stuff on the track work. But as I've been building this shift, as I've been embracing this shift, I've been thinking about service as actually a space for doing some of the radical and imaginative future building work that I want to do with my students. I've been thinking about how to try to bring a people first philosophy with me into service, how to make service really collaborative and about experience making. One of my mentors in the department asked me told me, there will always be opportunities to do service work. So find service work that is meaningful. As we all know, there are lots of committees, and maybe committees are not on the highest list of things that we find meaningful, but rather than seeking out meaningful service opportunities, finding meaning in service. So I want to just highlight a couple of those things and what I mean by the way I've approached service. One is this, our department built an RPT addendum during the pandemic. So this came out of conversations within the department. Many of us who were junior were anxious about the ways that the conditions around the pandemic might influence how our files, our RPT files looked and how they might be read. And so I had this opportunity to work on a committee that wrote an addendum about how we are experiencing as people and as professors and as scholars, how we were experiencing the pandemic and how that might influence what you see in our file. And this became a document that was ratified by the Faculty Senate and has been circulated around the university as a possible model for other departments that are also looking to build this kind of human sustaining RPT guideline. Another thing that I was able to participate in is the department culture committee survey building. So our department's had a lot of conversations recently about who we are and what the experience in our department is for faculty and students. And so a group of us got together and built an instrument for sort of taking the temperature in a safe way of how our colleagues are experiencing the department. And we presented our fact finding to the department, and that is generating some additional conversations about how we can improve working conditions and living conditions, just be better neighbors to one another. I think our department is really functional and we really like one another, but kind of really pushing to see how can we be even better. Another thing I just want to highlight is the joy that I've been getting as working as the advisor for the graduate research colloquium. A few of our MA students noted that they wanted to have their own kind of research conference, but they wanted it to be non-competitive. They wanted it to be regional. They wanted to build connections with folks at other universities. And so as their advisor, I've had the opportunity to help them kind of work on their CFP and shape that. And we're putting on a one-day symposium colloquium where the shape is kind of in flux right now in spring. And we're really excited to see this happen at CSUSB, where we do a lot of great research. Our students are doing a lot of great research, and this is going to give them an opportunity to show that off and to share that with their colleagues. So those are a couple of things that I've been up to. What is next for me is I'm working on a sort of new personal meets professional project, thinking about family histories. I found some work that my great-grandfather, who was a Chinese immigrant in Ohio and Montana in the early 20th century, published op-ed pieces and poetry. And I'm putting that in conversation with a project on Asian American rhetorics of belonging with a colleague at the University of Alabama. I want to bring some students into that work and develop research collaborations with students through my teaching and continue sort of experimenting with a different sort of pedagogical methods. And I'm looking for opportunities at the national level to bring this kind of service ethos to my professional organizations, and to see what other kind of work we can do collaborating with colleagues across institutions and across state lines. So thank you all for your time. And yeah, that's all.
Thank you so much, Professor Lee. I'm just taking over for a second because I think Professor Raguet was lost her connection. That was excellent. Thank you for this comprehensive overview of, this historical way of looking at your scholarship and your teaching. Because we're running out of time a little, I was going to suggest that we keep our questions for the end after the other two speakers also get a chance to speak, and then we'll come back for a Q&A session. Thank you so much. So our next speaker is Professor Andrew Oakes, a professor of design. Andrew Oakes has over 25 years of design industry experience as an in-house design and art director. He has worked for a diverse range of multinational companies, including Disney, Neutrogena, 24 Hour Fitness, and eBay. Currently, he works with clientele in the public utility space to create sustainability program campaigns for electric and water conservation efforts. In addition to his professional work, Andrew has 18 years of college teaching experience and currently holds the position of Professor of Design here at CSUSB. Thank you, Professor Oakes. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody being here. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. It was very difficult to kind of try and choose what I wanted to talk about today, whether it was professional or academic or whatever. And I didn't think it was going to be that hard, but it was. So finally got it together and was happy with the result. So just want to make sure I'm in full screen right now. Can everybody see that first slide? Okay.
Yes, we can see.
Did that first slide now change? Okay. So just a little background on what I'm going to present today. So I'm going to present basically a grant completion show. So I was involved in the Here to Career grant from 2017 to 2022. And I was the director of the Center for Digital Media within that grant, which gave me kind of the facility to be able to, and was chosen to do this work and put this show on. As part of the grant, I was also a co-producer of the project-based learning workshops that we had on campus for faculty. I attended the project-based learning conference at Worcester Polytechnic Institute in 2017, which just completely blew my mind about project-based learning. I had already taught that way for several years. I didn't know it, but was able to kind of wrap my head around some of the basic principles and tenets that really do make project-based learning what project-based learning is, the actual criteria. So that was really important to learn, and was very, it was a turning point for me in how I taught. And then lastly, I was able to, through that grant, implement PBL in several of my courses over the lifespan of the grant. So the show that I'm going to kind of highlight today that was put on in 2022 in the fall of last year was a culmination of all of the work that was done throughout the grant, and mainly the work that was done in the project-based learning area. So the Here to Career grant, this is just a picture of the show just to kind of get you oriented to what I'm going to be talking about today. It was held in the Dutton Gallery in September of 2022, and attached to Professor Rob Ray, as well as Professor Taylor Moon's show that was in the main gallery. So
Professor Oakes, so sorry to interrupt. I don't think we can see that image. We can only now see the first page, the first slide.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Okay, yes, Here to Career, yes. Now
okay, so yes. I'm gonna, full screen is kind of a catch-22. You never know if it's gonna work perfect or not.
Yes.
So this is, so you got a much better view of it now. So this is the show. It was held in the Dutton Gallery, and adjacent to it, like I said, was Professor Ray and Professor Moon's shows. And so this exhibit was a culmination of work from both students and faculty in support of that Title V grant. And the Here to Career grant was funded by the U.S. Department of Education and included CSUSB, Norco, and Valley College. So all the creative output that was shown in the show, were highlights of the grant's purpose, in which was improving student success in the field of digital media at Hispanic serving institutions. And on display was work that was either cross-campus, cross-discipline, and community-based collaborations featuring graphic design, digital music, video animation, and computer programming projects. So there was a lot of PBL done. So there was 50 projects that were done in total throughout the lifespan of the grant. So 21 at SBVC, 16 at CSUSB, and 13 in Norco. So as part of that, faculty were trained on project-based learning. And then in the reporting for the grant, students reported increases in 21st century skills as well as life skills. And furthermore, students reported that they learned specific skills, in other words, like software proficiency, that were going to help them in future careers. So this PBL, I believe, is extremely effective. It's a unique way to approach the class. And I feel that over the years that I've been teaching this way has been extremely beneficial to the students. So this is where I started. This is all the work that I had gathered from all of the professors across the 5 years. And so it was a little daunting, to say the least, at the beginning, and go, where do I even start? Because it was 5 years, 3 schools, 50 projects, and unfortunately, everybody had examples of all their work, right? I was hoping that maybe somebody went, no, I'm sorry, I don't have examples of that, but they did. So I had to start somewhere. And so this is just a few examples of some of the work that was done from the different universities. And starting up in the left-hand corner, that was done for the CSUSB Mental Health Awareness event, which is a event held on campus here, that the students worked as groups to develop brand identity solutions for them. The Wolverine Con was held at SBVC and is an annual event that, again, student groups worked within a branding class to put together all of the promotional materials for the event itself. Another event is up there in the top center, which was one of my courses. It was all promotional work that was done for the San Bernardino County Arts Council, which is called Arts Connection, and they wanted to rebrand their conference and called it the Creative Creatures Conference. They were trying to attract young people, and who better to do that work than was groups of young people. So right in the middle is a project from San Bernardino Valley College, where they were working with the food services on campus to have the wrap for the truck. So they wanted to come up with graphics and a small brand that this truck would be on campus and be attractive to students. The Rhythm Lounge was done for SBVC's music department. Taylor Moon's work is up there in the top right-hand side, which was done for the Los Angeles Maritime Museum and the Caregiver Peer Support Program. And below that was for Milltree, a veterans support program that works not only with veterans, but artists, and bringing them together for healing. And that was, using art therapy, poetry, just a really beautiful program. And they're, currently use that website as one of their main resources to attract people to the program. So this is how I start. In this case, I've got a lot of work to do. This is the Dutton Museum in a very kind of rudimentary way, just starting to spread out, groups of items, thinking about it in terms of cross-campus projects, community partner projects, cross-discipline. We wanted to do something called the grant success by the numbers to show on a large infograph so people could understand how impactful this grant has been to different audiences, students, faculty alike. And it was video, it was music, it was physical pieces, printed pieces. So it was really a lot to wrangle. And I think that's why I'm kind of showing this is, I haven't ever put on a show that I was part of the show in this case. It was really kind of a neat meta experience to have been involved with this grant for 5 years and then get to be and have the opportunity to be chosen to pull it all together. And so this is kind of, the second step in the process for me is when I start knowing how many pieces we've chosen, the different categories, what's going to be video versus what's going to be, you know, printed and, you know, attached to the wall and so forth. You can see even over here on the left-hand side, I got no idea what I'm going to do yet, but I've got to get it on the wall somehow. And this is really a neat way to, for me as a designer, to be able to know what this physical space is capable of, how the pieces talk to each other, as well as, you know, leaving room, I guess, for, you know, even just a video plugin. Can we even do it? You know, so working with limitations and then making those into opportunities is really the fun part of the project itself. So what, you know, good graphic designer wouldn't be excited to do the logo for the whole thing? I don't understand why some students now don't like doing logos that call themselves graphic designers. I think they're sociopaths, but that's just one person's opinion. I love doing logos. So anyways, these logos were presented to the committee. One was chosen. They all kind of had these arrows, you know, that I was playing with to, you know, have the idea of, you know, a springboard. It's called Here to Career. What else are we going to use but an arrow and moving forward? So we chose this one here on the right, thought it was a nice choice, very contemporary. And then bouncing off of that and using those little dots, those little halftones, that kind of set the tone for everything else that I was able to do and pull together. So this is, you know, part of the grant as well, internships and mentoring. There were 175 peer mentees at both Norco and San Bernardino Valley College. There was 43 paid internships across the community and different campuses. So this, you know, as I was working on this, it really, and when we had to choose a project to show today and the word impactful was used, I felt like it was very impactful. And it was really a special place to be as this curator and producer of this show, to see all of that work come to fruition in one place and to be able to highlight it. So these are kind of the, you know, the Here to Career by the numbers. Like I said, 175 mentees, 43 internships, 85, you know, tutoring opportunities. Courses were developed, hybrid courses, mobile courses, and of course the 50 project-based learning courses. And a special shout out over there to Mike and John. I can't believe John is now gone, but Mike is still there. So a special shout out to them for all of their help for putting the show together and helping with some of those large graphics. This is everybody that was involved. Over here on the left at CSUSB, Katie Grip, Rob Ray, Taylor Moon, Julie Taylor, Frank Houlihan, me, Yun K. Howe, Miriam Bitlamitze, and Kevin Zhang, and of course, Brian Heisterkamp. He said he had a more important meeting than to show up today, so I just kind of left it at that. But he was wonderful to work with, and now we're working on a whole nother grant called the Pathways to Success, and we're 1 year into it, and it's just phenomenal. So here's just a few images from the show that were taken by the university. We had really good attendance. It was really nice to be associated with Taylor and Rob's show. So we had, you know, a full museum. All of the rooms were full and well attended, and people, you know, came in from all of the different shows and kind of cross-pollinated. It was a lot of fun to see people interacting with the work. Little things like that little podium there. How do you, you know, display music? Well, you produce this little box and put a speaker in it and have people read about it and ask them a question. So it was really fun for me to be able to solve all these problems. I really felt like I was in my element, and especially being involved with the grant itself. It was all very known. I've curated other shows that you just walk in and you get the work. And in this case, I was part of the work the whole time. So that was really a special place to be. We had, you know, game design, we had video, and, you know, making room for all of these different displays and ways to display it was, again, something that I was a little bit new to, and was a really good challenge. And of course, I had to put in a picture of the dean. Thank you for coming. And it was just, again, a fantastic experience. And thank you guys for listening, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for this fascinating talk. Clearly, it was an impactful project. It's palpable. I'm sure the students feel really lucky to have been involved in this project. Thank you for that, Professor Oakes. We will move on to our fourth and final speaker, and then you can go ahead and ask any questions that you may have. I think Dr. Jasmine Lee and Professor Oakes and Miriam will still be here. TC has already left. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Miriam Fernandez. Miriam is an associate professor of English and the composition coordinator for CSUSB's first-year composition program. She teaches rhetoric and writing courses such as first-year composition, writing in the public sphere, theories of public and professional writing, and graduate courses like cultures of research and multimodal composition in the public sphere. Her current research is focused on the rhetorical practices of Mexican communities. Thank you so much, Professor Fernandez. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. So I thought that for this presentation, I would actually present on something that I'm currently working on. And this is an investigation of the rhetorical elements of Llorona storytelling. I actually received a summer research fellowship, so this is kind of the product of that work as well. So a little bit of background. La Llorona is a Mexican folktale about a ghost woman who roams the streets crying out, "Ay, mis hijos." She searches for her children who died years or perhaps even centuries ago. It kind of depends on the story. And there are a variety of versions. So depending on the story, we get slightly different details, but kind of a more commonly known one is that when she was alive, she drowned her children in a fit of rage after her husband decided to leave her for another woman. In some versions, her children just died from an accidental drowning, and so it kind of varies there as well. The story is primarily an oral tradition, but it has appeared in print and a couple of short stories, children's storybooks, and blogs. And so a lot of scholarly work tends to focus on the print editions of this story, and it's oftentimes analyzed as a literary text with a focus on the patriarchal components of the story, as well as like the the newer feminist reclaimings of La Llorona that we have seen in the last couple of decades. So my present study that I'm currently working on, I started with the idea of, because there are such variations of the story, I did wonder whether there was a way to trace what are the origins of the story? Are there generational or geographic differences that perhaps we might be able to trace? I was also curious about the rhetorical choices that storytellers make when they share a Llorona story, and what are the rhetorical differences in the various versions that we get. So what I've been doing is I have been interviewing various people from various ages. I think they range from late 20s to like mid 70s. Men and women, different career choices, so that they really vary. And I've interviewed them to find out about the stories that they know, who told them the story, and if they ever retold the story, what choices they made. So for the interview process, I'm using grounded theory, excuse me. And then once I get to the analysis stage, that's when I'll apply more rhetorical theory. So the purpose of this study is kind of twofold. One, I really want to preserve this oral tradition of Llorona stories. One of the things that prompted me to do this study is the sense that these stories are not being told as often as they were, several decades ago. And so I wanted to have some way of preserving those stories. So I'm recording them, and then parts of the audio will be put up in a digital collection with the file library. I'm currently working on the transcription, so it hasn't made its way to the library, but eventually that's the idea. And my second purpose is to compile a big enough sample to be able to rhetorically analyze Llorona storytelling from a more communal perspective as well. Because, like I said, a lot of times the current literature tends to focus more of a literary analysis. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and play a little clips of the samples of the interviews that I've done. And I have the English translations here, so it's in order, so you can kind of get a sense. But I thought it would be important to hear their voices.
En la escuela, en la primaria, tenían historias de que en la noche de ahí salía la Llorona. Porque tenía miedo que fuera a salir la dichosa Llorona de adentro de la escuela, que porque decían que la escuela era un panteón y que de ahí venía la Llorona buscando a sus hijos.
Estaba un río cerca y dicen que se escuchaban ruidos. Entonces una vez yo escuché un ruido y dice a mi abuelita que era la Llorona, que en la noche estaba llorando porque ahogó a sus hijos. Entonces que si me salía para afuera, la Llorona me iba a llevar a mí también porque ella pensaría que yo soy su hija.
Y pues nada más eso sé que ella se casó muy enamorada de un hombre, creo que era criollo o español, y tuvo 2 hijos, pero él la quiso dejar, pues, que le dijo que era una ratera, que nada más quería su dinero y que él se iba a casar con otra, porque la dejaba mucho tiempo sola para irse a trabajar. Entonces, pues ella, cuando él se fue en la noche, que dijo, pues te voy a quitar lo que más quieres, que él quería a sus niños, que le dijo que le iba a quitar a sus hijos. Y pues ella que los agarró de las manitas y se fue caminando, que los niños iban brincando y sonriendo, y que ella empezó a escuchar algunas voces que le decían, mátalos, mátalos, mátalos. Pues ella los ahogó de a uno y luego al siguiente. Entonces que dejó de oír la voz y que no supo qué había hecho. Entonces pues ella también se metió al lago. Ella también se murió.
So those are just 3 little clips from the stories that I'm collecting, and they're very small, so there's definitely a lot of other bits of context that are missing. A lot of times, like when they tell the story, they also kind of bring up other times that they've been told the story and the ways that kind of mixes. And then here's a couple other ones that I thought were really interesting. One participant was talking about how the La Llorona lived in Mexico City, was very wealthy. She fell in love with a man, but he cheated on her. And once she realized that he had cheated, she took their children and drowned them. And when the people of the pueblo found out, they dragged her through the whole city, all the way to the center of the town, and they burned her. And then after she was burned, then she kind of became this haunting spirit. She was appearing in a long white dress. She was very beautiful. She was floating, seemed to have no feet. Her hair is long, and she cries out for her children. And that's kind of the story that she was told. And here in the second one, the person kind of contextualizes why the story was told. And she says, I remember that my mom would tell us to scare the children. The moms of before, that's how they would educate their kids. She would tell us that there was a woman whose children had drowned. She had gone crazy from the grief and she died eventually, but her soul was not at rest. So she would appear looking for her children. And my mom would say to be careful not to go outside at night because she would confuse us for her children and take us with her. So that's one of the main things is that I found that's interesting is that there isn't indication in the stories that she will kill the new kids, right? But she will take them. And so it becomes like possibly they die, but maybe they go somewhere else. We're not really sure. So I have kind of here just like a couple summaries of some of the preliminary findings that I'm getting as I'm continuing to do these interviews. About half of the participants have participated in retelling the story, often to peers later in life and sometimes to their children. The mothers who, the interviewees who are mothers who do tell the story to their kids, that report that they do so for two reasons. One, as a mode of control for misbehaving children. So anytime the kids are just being, rambunctious, they're like, hey, here's the Llorona, she's going to come and get you. And two, as a form of cultural survival as well. So that was one thing that kind of came up, is that being in the US, the mothers feel like their children are not getting as much of their Mexican culture. And so they wanted to share that story for that purpose. There were also quite a few mothers who just would absolutely not tell the story to their children because they feel uncomfortable with the idea of making them scared. So that was kind of two different perspectives. The stories do range in detail, but the basic structure is the drowned children, a mad woman, and a haunting. Sometimes there's a man that has some kind of betrayal, but not always. And she's not always at fault for the drowning. So I thought that was also interesting. From what I can tell, the most creative rhetorical choices come from children and young adults. So sometimes a young adult babysitting a child would, say like, oh, if you go down there, that person is La Llorona and she's going to get you. So as a way of kind of keeping them in. Other children would actually also take kind of current moments and sort of blend them in. So there was a lot of blending of stories. One reported how kids, peers, young children, would kind of converge the story of Bloody Mary and La Llorona, kind of using like the mirror as like a space where La Llorona might come out. Another reported having her friend tell her that when Selena Quintanilla died, like the pop star in the 90s, that she had become La Llorona. And so it's kind of interesting how like little kids play around with that. There also tend to be like kids seem to be the ones that are most like mean about the story. So they really do use it to terrify others. So that was interesting as well. There's about 25% of the participants report having some kind of real sighting, either their own experience or someone very close to them, a husband, a mother, a cousin. And nearly all participants really truly believed the story initially and for a long time, and had very real feelings of being frightened. And it was also a story that was, for the most part, told again and again. And then, so the storytellers believe the initial story. So that's kind of some of the findings that I'm seeing at this particular point. And some further questions that have come up is, are there any factors that contribute to the stopping of Llorona storytelling? It seems like there might be some connection to migrating to the US, some cultural changes to parenting, also more entertainment choices, right? That was another, I think I meant to put that on here and I didn't, but it seems like the storytelling had three main purposes. It was either to entertain the children, late at night, like there's nothing to do. It's like, let's tell some stories. To educate the children in a way of like, these are dangerous places, don't go there. And then a couple was just to like, really just to frighten the children. And so those are the three main reasons why people would tell the story. And then I'm continuing to wonder about the generational differences in Llorona storytelling. It seems to be much more communal in older generations, and search gets a little bit less in more like recent generations. And I'm also curious about how the storytellers anchor their stories to location or community. So a lot of stories were, as like one of the clips, it was at the school, right? And another place it was at the nearby river, or a nearby embankment, or, so oftentimes these stories were anchored to a specific location. So I'm curious about some of that as well. So yeah, that's my current research. Thank you for listening.
This is awesome. Thank you, Miriam. I think everybody is now interested to know what your findings will be. Please come back and tell us.
Yeah.
Yes. So maybe now Dean, do we have some time for questions? Minutes?
Yes, if people are
Okay.
willing to stay, please
Okay.
feel free to ask our presenter some question. I also want to remind everybody that I have Kelly Cookie here from the Coyote Radio and Advertising. So after this, we will also have the podcast of today's presenters. So we'll have more in-depth interview with our presenters, and we'll create a new series, Cal Talk series, faculty who got tenure and promoted. And so this will help us build a nice repertoire of our podcast, different episodes of podcasts. So stay tuned for our podcast about our 4 faculties, their own research or their teaching experience as well too. So yes, and we'll post the information the website once those podcasts is done.
Wonderful. So if you have any questions, any comments?
Maybe I have a quick question, because maybe I'll ask Miriam first. I was so fascinating about your Yelona story, right? Of course, I read your FAR and everything, but it's interesting just kind of hearing you kind of unfold the story in different renditions or interviews, right? I couldn't help but notice there's a lot of, even from gender perspective, right? There's a lot of representation. You could even, look at the story, analyzing the story from a cultural perspective, from the gender perspective, from a feminist perspective, right? So, so perhaps you could maybe dissect a little bit from the gender and the cultural and feminist perspective. What does this story, of course, it's a very fascinating story and been told for years and years, but, I couldn't really help but notice that there's a very strong kind of feminist message in there.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, because when we dissect the story itself, it's not a feminist story, right? It's this woman who is essentially punished for being, for breaking away from her role as a mother, right? But it seems like in the actual storytelling, the ways that it gets experienced is maternal in a lot of ways, not always, but there's definitely about half of the stories there's like a loving component to recalling the story. So I'm not sure exactly like how it fits, but I have a couple of male participants, not too many. Most of the majority are women. So I would definitely love to see if, as I interview more people, if I'm able to have more male participants, if there's a slight variation. There was one story where it appeared to be more adults talking, and the story sort of switches to the La Llorona appearing in the road, asking for a ride from men. And then when the men stop, like, she disappears. So it's a slight difference in when it's being told to an adult male as opposed to a child. And so I think that, yeah, I'm not really sure about the gender component yet. But it's something that I definitely want to continue to investigate, because I feel like there's a slight, I don't know, a split in like how we understand the story as being patriarchal, but how we experience the story as being matriarchal. So that I'm interested in that difference.
I think it's interesting too, Miriam, if you don't mind me jumping in. Just the way that, you know, that some, like you were saying, sometimes that she's judged as evil, but then sometimes it's almost like it's not her fault or something, right? Like, but one story that you told, or that you shared, the woman was saying she heard voices telling her kill her children, right? And so that seems like a really interesting shift, right? So it wasn't her intention. It's like something else is like making her do this, you know?
And in a couple of them, the children just drowned by accident. So there's also that element as well, that it may be the story itself is not about, you know, a woman who renounces her motherhood, but rather an accidental death, which I think that drowning amongst like young children is like one of the reasons why young children die is the drowning, right? So I think it could also be like connected to that kind of experience, right? That's the grief is what propels her to become a spirit, and the grief is so great that she surpasses her human body and becomes a spirit. And I think that that's very telling of the maternal instinct, right? That, you know, you have such grief that you just won't go. You're just going to continue and stay there. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? I think Jasmine, I don't know if Raisa is still here or not, but I think some of our newer faculty were interested in how you made your service so meaningful. And if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I saw that Raisa had to leave, so
Okay.
hopefully I'll connect with her at
Oh,
some
and
point.
this is recorded, so
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that I mean, it's been a process. I think that like I said at the beginning, service opportunities, like it just felt like a thing I needed to do, right? I felt, even though we were told like, don't do service your first year, like it just felt like that was kind of the job, the department citizenship, and you just sign up for things and then you help keep the wheels on. And then as I started to understand more about what the role of the committees that I was on was, or how the work, then the decisions that we're making in these conversations and in these committees have material effects, how they shape the kind of work that we do, the experience that students have, and how we could use those spaces to also build things that weren't just about maintenance, right? That we're kind of building new possibilities. And it required maybe a little bit more initial work, because it requires thinking, not about just about keeping things going, but about what else we could do. That's when service started becoming differently meaningful to me. So really happy to talk about that if anybody wants to go into more detail.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jasmine. I think I saw Professor Poole. It's Matthew. I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, I mean, I could, unless anyone else has a question. But yeah, no, why don't I just go ahead? I mean, a quick question to Jasmine, really. I was just wondering if you had come across and possibly incorporated any accelerationist theories into your work at all. It seemed like, with your interest in political economy and affect theory, in the last sort of 10 years or so, various approaches to like accelerationism were quite popular on the left and the right in academia. And I wondered if that was an area.
Yeah, thanks for this question. I'm not familiar with that term. At first, you cut out for a second, and I thought you said situationist, and it was like, yes, that, situationist interventions have informed the way that I think about writing pedagogy, but I'm not familiar with the term accelerationist. So I'd be very happy to take any of those references. And I appreciate your comment in the chat, and I do hope that we find an opportunity to talk about affective resistance or to neoliberalism or whatever that might look like. Thank you.
And I have one quick question, if that's okay, Professor Oakes. So you talked about the diversity of the projects that students had completed, and then your task was to set them up in a way that was that made sense, right? So, and there were a variety of media and themes and all of that. Can you give us an example of how you made some of your decisions about how to set up the show?
Yeah, I think, I showed that one slide that basically had 500 files on it, and that was kind of what came my way once we started asking all of the instructors for work from those individual project-based learning courses. And so I think ultimately Brian and I got together just trying to find a way to categorize them, try to make meaning of them so that it just wasn't them walking into a hodgepodge representation. But that was also specific to the goals of the grant as well, to be able to do these project-based learning courses or to be able to receive a stipend from them. They had to either be cross-disciplinary, they had to be cross-campus, they had to be a collaboration. So that was the criteria. that was involved in them being able to even, receive compensation for that effort. And so that seemed like a pretty straightforward or linear way to then organize.
Mm.
The hardest part was then choosing within those individual categories what work was, essentially the best way to represent it, and criteria of what was the best work, and most of the time that kind of fell on, is it visually appealing, as well as if it is complicated and it doesn't have, let's say, an aesthetic, a certain visual aesthetic that might be pleasing to most. That's a really sticky conversation. Matthew wants to jump in, I'm sure, on that one. But one way or another, there were some more complicated things that you really had to get into and look at and understand, because it was more a concept. So, that was some of the decisions.
Thank you very much. Well, we're out of time. And if there are any other questions, if not, then thank you so much to all of you. Congratulations. We're so proud of all of you.
Thank you.
And hope everybody has a good afternoon. And thank you to the participants.
Thank you.
very
Thank
much.
you to all the presenters and all the audience for staying. So watch out for our announcement of all the podcast series on our presenters. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.